Hi, everybody. We are the Skeleton Crew, and today we're going to talk to you about the second to last marine reptile we have in this game waiting for us. The next one is slightly better known and slightly larger, and a slightly more interesting animal than this one.
And better.
He's like him, but better.
And this is our second to last attempt to record this video.
Indeed, yes. No, this is the last one. And yeah, so we're going to talk to you today about Plesiosaurus. Before we talk about Plesiosaurus, I have to ask you to please subscribe to the Skeleton Crew if you haven't already. And if you have already subscribed to the Skeleton Crew, that's great. You've still got some work ahead of you. You have to like this video and comment on it. And at least consider supporting us on Patreon or buying our merch.
Minimum, you gotta consider it.
You don't have to. You don't have to do it, but you got to think about doing it. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Handshake.
I'm taking the Blue's Clues approach of talking directly to the viewer and waiting for them to respond before I continue.
Do you know who my name?
Yeah. Do you know who I am? Very good. I'm Dr. James Napoli, research instructor at Stony Brook University.
I'm not continuing that bit. That's ridiculous. I'm telling you who I am. My name is Amelia Zietlow. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
My brain is just melted tonight. Because I'm just cracking up about just hola, soy Scott Johnston, the vertebrate paleontologist, fossil preparator and technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology.
Very good. My name is Alex Rubenstahl, and I'm a PhD candidate at Yale University. And I couldn't think of a charming childhood show that someone hasn't already done, like Dora the Explorers or Blue's Clues. So I did nothing.
Ni hao, kindly.
God.
I'm Dalton Meyer. I'm a PhD candidate, also at Yale University.
Ni hao.
And together, nosotros are the Skeleton Crew.
What was that weird Spanish
Well, Dalton.
Yes.
Why don't you release the animal?
Certainly.
Can you tell us what this animal is?
I wish I knew enough Latin to do the Dora the Explorer inflection, but just like doing the Catalanarian orations.
What is up with their swimming animation? Where is that an animation mistake where it kind of gives them a weird humpback when they?
So that was something I was going to mention like later, but we could behoove it now, which is that one gripe I have with this model is just that it occasionally is too bendy in the middle. Like something that characterizes Plesiosaurs is having a very rigid trunk, and you don't see that in this model as much. And you know, it's something we debated talking about too. It kind of gives it a look like some of the illustrations of the Loch Ness Monster, where they try to accommodate it having a hump.
Oh yeah, because that's always something that's talked about in a lot of those old, like sea serpent descriptions, is that they're always depicted as having a lot of humps to them.
Yeah, but I think it might just be a weird thing with how the model is constructed.
No, it doesn't look intentional. I don't think that this was an intentional homage to early descriptions of sea serpents that was given to this guy.
Like a British team, though, like a UK team, right? It's got snake scales on its face. It's always, to me, kind of, I don't know, putting these things together, maybe without any evidence, but I don't know. Maybe they're evoking the sea serpent a little bit.
Maybe.
Well, I've now said everything I need to say about the animal.
Yes, but so what does its name mean, though?
Its name means near lizard because it's almost a lizard. Apparently, according to paleontologists in the 1800s.
Yes. So
Be generous.
This was apparently named because in early paleontology, there were 2 data points for fossils. And of the 2 marine reptiles that were being compared when looking at this guy, which is Ichthyosaurus, that as a loyal viewer of the Skeleton Crew, you probably watched our video on that and remarked, like we did, of, this reptile looks absolutely nothing like any reptile that has existed before or since. And that's really weird. And then this guy, which at least doesn't look exactly like a fish, and when this thing is closer to a lizard than Ichthyosaurus is, and so we will call it near lizard, which is extra funny because quite a bit earlier, Mosasaurus was found, which just is a lizard. Although, Amelia, it was not known to be just a lizard at the time, correct?
No,
Okay.
It was. I did a little bit of background reading to sort this out. And first of all, it was a silly situation all around. But we'll talk about that another time. The Mosasaurus fossils were first found in Europe in the 1700s, in the late 1700s. And they were described in 1800 as lizards. Because early on, they didn't know what they were, if it was some kind of whale or crocodile or what. So it was just the grand animal.
Cool.
Should have kept that name. Should have kept that name.
Should have just kept that. No, so, but then in 1800, they're like, no, this is a lizard. They, as in Camper and Cuvier. Cuvier, a couple years later, was like, this is a grand animal and it is a lizard. But it wasn't named Mosasaurus for another, 20 years. So Mosasaurus wasn't named, but it was definitely known to the scientific community as a lizard, and as a marine lizard.
That must have been such a cool period to be a scientist when you're like, all right, so there's these normal animals, and then there's this huge thing from the Netherlands, and what the is that?
The grand
Maybe,
animal.
maybe the Netherlands just did that.
Well, it was easy. You could just be like, the flood. It was alive before the flood.
Well, I mean, this was of the group of animals that is sometimes just that was referred to at the time of the antediluvian animals, which is such a good word, and I really wish that there were reason to use it more because it's really good.
Now, perhaps here's a charitable interpretation of Plesiosaurus being the near lizard. What if the guy who named it was only familiar with Mosasaurus?
Who named it?
Lizard he knew.
Ooh, who did name it?
So he'd seen Mosasaurus, and then he'd seen Ichthyosaurus.
It looks more like that than Ichthyosaurus. So keep
It
up in
doesn't,
mind.
in my opinion.
I don't know.
You think Ichthyosaurus looks more like a lizard than this thing does?
I think an Ichthyosaurus looks more like a Mosasaurus than either of them look like Plesiosaurus. They've both got long faces.
That's fair.
Oh, okay, yeah,
that's fair.
I disagree. I mean, if you puckle gun to my head with the square barrel, if you were to show me Ichthyosaurus and Plesiosaurus and Mosasaurus, or rather, I've already seen Mosasaurus, and then you show me 2. It's like one of those experiments you can volunteer for in college. And management needs you to tell me which of these looks more like a lizard. I would probably say this one. I'm not saying either looks like that, but I'm more in that direction to me. I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
But I have a question. Why does it have to be compared to lizards?
It has to be.
Are these guys not familiar with other kinds?
Are you intending to name something without referencing another thing?
Well, so I think I've made a discovery.
Please.
Or some clarifications. I was going to just say what I thought was a charitable read of the situation, but I think I ended up just being right. Because I found the paper that names Plesiosaurus. And it's, it is in part made and named with specific consideration to Ichthyosaurus, I think mostly just because they were found in the same place. So there was less consideration. It seems in my brief scanning, and this thing has not been OCR'd, so you can't search the text. It doesn't seem to make reference to Mosasaurus or the grand animal or anything from the Netherlands.
I guess were the British aware of mosasaurus? Maybe not,
Maybe
I
not.
suppose, because it was from the Netherlands and
But they
French
also,
people.
just with the lack of understanding of like what was going on with these like fossils and what they really represented, it may not have seemed an appropriate comparison to make. They're like, hey, here are these two things from England, and it's named Plesiosaurus. The paper itself kind of indicates why. Notice of the discovery of a new fossil animal forming a link between Ichthyosaurus and crocodile, together with general remarks on the osteology of the Ichthyosaurus. And so it really is just that this thing, and phylogenetically, if you like ask me really what's going on with marine reptiles, I think they're right that this is closer to modern reptiles than Ichthyosaurus. That it is in that way. And the name Plesiosaurus has been chosen, expressing its near approach to the order Lacerta. And at this point, I don't know, and I could be wrong, but it may have still been like a consideration to make Crocodilia a part of Lacerta.
I think it was until actually kind of the middle of the 1800s, I think. I want to say I feel like it was Huxley who actually separated them. I think it might have been Huxley in like the 1870s or 1880s who noticed, because Huxley and Owen, I think, both separately studied crocodilians and said like these things are more like birds than they are like lizards. I think Owen is the one who's the lateral sphenoid observation is attributed to. But I know I've read Huxley's description talking about like postcranial characters like Procelis vertebrae and everything, and saying that, Procelis vertebrae are lizards, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think he was saying that are crocs episthocoelous?
Yes, most of the time. Depends. Yeah. But yes.
Modern crocs, generally. Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading one of his old papers about that sometime a long time ago.
Just kind of a thought I had on what Dalton said, right? With that things like, and we can get into this into the phylogeny discussion, but like, I was thinking about this because Amelia, when she was like, the outline of an ichthyosaur is kind of more like a mosasaur, and I'm like, yeah,
it is.
If you took like one bone out of the skeleton of Plesiosaurus and showed it to me, like you could do that with most of the skeleton as long as you don't show me what the whole animal is like. And for 80% of the skeleton, I'm going to be like, that's more like a lizard. That's more like a lizard. That's more like a lizard. That's more like a lizard, because at least like there's the vertebra have zygapophyses.
I would say the vertebrae maybe, but the limbs and the pectoral bones, pectoral and pelvic bones,
that 20% being the weird little horrible phalanges.
Well, those are bad, but also like all the other limb bones look like garbage too.
Garbage. That's cool.
Well, hey, it's a plesiosaur. It's like 80% vertebrae.
At least they both have ectopterygoids, man. Like at least their skulls aren't stupid.
Yeah. No, and I guess, and also, I mean, the other point here actually would be that they didn't. I don't think they would have known what a whole mosasaur would look like because they only had the Paris specimen and the Taylor's Museum specimen.
Mm-hmm. So, like,
based on the jaw, which is long and low and slender, that's where my comparison was coming in. So, where like if I were to see an ichthyosaur and the Mosasaurus holotype and a plesiosaur, I wouldn't think lizard.
Were there no complete mosasaurs until the stuff in the American Midwest was found?
There's some scrappy stuff. But like, I don't know the ages exactly, but there's some scrappy stuff from Europe that's like mostly complete. So they were getting there. Like the Hanosaurs the one Hanosaur is more complete. Some of the Mosasaurus have like more to them, but they're surprisingly not very good relative to the Western Interior stuff.
Cool.
I think that this is a bit of a case of sometimes how these like really old papers kind of ramble a little bit and aren't always the most internally consistent. This seems to be a bit of the case that they're using saurus both in terms of reference to lizards, but also just like modern reptiles more
just
broadly.
Reptiles in general,
because they're like this is more approaching the crocodile condition, and they make note of like Alex exactly what you said, that hey, the vertebra in this thing look a lot more like a modern reptile like vertebra than ichthyosaur vertebrae do, and like they both have paddles, but they're like the paddles in this are more comparable to a sea turtle than the ones of Ichthyosaurus. So they're kind of referencing all sorts of living reptiles. in drawing the comparison, and I think are just kind of, accidentally, by virtue of the fact that plesiosaurs are just less modified than ichthyosaurs, honing in on a fact that they're more comparable to modern reptiles in their anatomy than ichthyosaurs, which is, part and parcel of why it's so hard to put ichthyosaurs on the reptile tree. Not that it's easy to put plesiosaurs on the reptile tree. We'll talk about that, and we have talked about that before.
Hey, look, social interaction.
Woo! I do love it.
It's very cute. It's very,
I'm so
very
facing
cute.
for the social interaction.
I mean, like, if we're doing like a direct one-to-one comparison of just like looking at whole animals, because like that is the other thing to consider, that like Plesiosaurus and Ichthyosaurus were known from whole dudes, because the stuff that Mary Anning was pulling out of Lime Regis are just like, it's the animal. In comparison to the early Mosasaur stuff, that like it would be there is an alternate timeline when someone was a little less liberal with the use of saurus here, and said that these guys were the near turtle lizards, or the near turtles, because like I've like always heard the description that like they're basically like long-necked shell-less turtles, which I think just fits aesthetically.
Yes, and I was going to talk about a little bit about why that might be.
Oh yeah, were you?
Hello, viewer. You have jumped to this timestamp because you are a certified Fylogenum fan. It is Fylogenum time in the video. I am going to now talk to you about Fylogenum and where our animal goes in the phylogeny. You could replace this section by just looking on Wikipedia and looking for yourself, but I appreciate that you don't, and you want to hear me talk about it, which I am going to do now. Plesiosaurus is a plesiosaur. Now, that may be shocking and upsetting, so please take a moment. It is a proper plesiosaur. So the Plesiosauria is a group that, as we have discussed in the past, kind of contains two major lineages, these being the plesiosaurs and the pliosaurs. Plesiosaurs traditionally being long-necked, short-head, pliosaurs being big head, sometimes big neck. But within both groups, there are acquisitions. There are your long-headed plesiosaurs and your long-necked pliosaurs. There's a lot of evolutionary innovation and convergence in these two groups. Plesiosaurus is cool because within the plesiosaur side, it is a pretty early member of the group. It is not the earliest, but it's up there. It's in the early Jurassic. It's fairly basal. There are these earlier organisms called pistosaurs, which look a lot like plesiosaurs. These are kind of the long-necked, small-headed ancestors of what we call true or Plesiosauria. The primitive condition for both plesiosaurs and pliosaurs is long neck, little head.
Kind of like what we see in a Nothosaurus in the game.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that animal was in the game. Good example. Yes. Yeah, just like Nothosaurus. And
Nothosaurus isn't a pistosaur, though, right?
No. It's outside.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, Nothosaurids are a more early divergent group of what we call Sauropterygians, true Sauropterygians, which are then all of these groups are together in Sauropterygia. I think there are 7 Sauropterygians in this game: 3 pliosaurs, 3 plesiosaurs, and a Nothosaur, which gives you that's a pretty good sampling, frankly. I mean, yeah. I would like that back on.
Me too.
Depending on who you ask, a Thalattosaur, which may be closely related or within Sauropterygians. They're cool. They're Triassic. Anyway,
even if placodonts are so weird looking. Oh my god,
they're pretty friggin' sweet, if you ask me. And they're also related to a point I'm going to make in a second. Anyway, all of these groups are Sauropterygians. Sauropterygians are a group of, get ready to say it with me, problematic phylogenetic position.
Oh no!
Wait, really?
You may be surprised to hear. So, for one neat thing, if you are familiar with anatomical terms, when we're discussing kind of the major groups of amniotes, egg-laying organisms, we often discuss the distinction between synapsids and diapsids. Synapsids having a single opening behind their eye, and being mammals and their extinct archaic relatives. So Gorgonopsids, things like Dimetrodon, things like Listersaurus, both in the game. And then the other group we talk about are the diapsids, reptiles with two openings behind their eye. There are more primitive things that have no openings behind the eye, that include a group that might be real called parareptiles, etc. But diapsids, two openings behind the eye. In our understanding, modern understanding, sauropterygians and also ichthyosaurs are both diapsids. But the groups, most members of the group have what we call a euryapsid condition, in which they just have one opening behind their eye, like a synapsid. So it makes it, along with a suite of other highly specialized characters, because these groups are marine, and the earliest members of all these groups are still pretty marine, extremely, like fully marine in the case of ichthyosaurs, and then for sauropterygians, things like Nothosaurus and Pachypleurosaurus are marine, but like how marine are they? They look more like, they have like hands at least. Anyway, so yeah, there's uncertainty. They've been found to be more closely related to lepidosaurs in the past, so lizards and snakes. They've been found in kind of this marine reptile group with ichthyosaurs, which I personally don't think is real. I think that's a case of two groups being pulled together by convergence, which is which are features shared not due to common ancestry, but they evolve independently, maybe to solve a similar issue. This happens, for example, in long-snouted crocodilians. So there are these marine crocodiles called Paleontologists that are often pulled kind of deep up into the tree to these other semi-marine Tethysoukians. But this is not widely believed to be where they go. They have some primitive features in their brain and stuff. Anyway, in emerging breaking news, maybe they're closely related to turtles and archosaurs. So within the last decade or so, there has been emerging support for a clade of turtles plus archosaurs, so crocodiles, dinosaurs, birds, pterosaurs. And interestingly, in a few modern morphological analyses, sauropterygians are found to be more closely related to archosaurs than even turtles, which is an interesting position, and one I don't disagree with necessarily. I mean, you could gun to my head, you could be like, maybe turtles are a little more, maybe sauropterygians are a little more. Maybe they're sister to each other, but also still closely related to archosaurs. So this is not, I wouldn't say this is settled. I certainly have hypotheses I find more compelling for a few reasons, including how the skulls are constructed and the palates.
Anything you can share?
No.
Okay.
I'm not going to. But now I'm going to talk about turtles. Scott earlier said, when we were kind of talking about, was that in this version of the video or the version of the video?
Yeah.
Bend, where they bend too much?
Oh.
Yeah, that was in this one.
Yes.
Swag. So, in the Triassic period, there are more kinds of marine reptiles than ever before. Yes. And like
more than you can ever imagine.
4 of them are turtles, basically. Eusaurus Eusaurus are actually something else. Sauropterygians, turtles, Eusaurus, because I think those are maybe archosauromorphs, maybe.
Sauropterygians and Eusaurus are entirely different things.
There's something called Eusaurus, which was like thought to be a sauropterygian, and I think it's
I wonder
now
why.
To be an archosauromorph, which is very confusing and stupid.
Oh my god!
Which is very funny because they named it
Eusaurus, the true Sauropterygians is not a. Oh my god!
Why
This is like This is like the whole, like, the pseudosoukians, the false crocodiles, contain true crocodiles.
Well, it's very funny because I found a palette dataset for Eusaurus, and I got really excited because I was like, oh, wow, I can add, like, Saurus vargus. This is this weird enigmatic group to my analysis. And then, like, I was doing the bookkeeping. Like, I had it on there for, like, months, and I was, like, doing the bookkeeping on my dataset, and I was looking some stuff up. I'm like, Archosauromorph, what? Anyway. So they're those guys, turtles, placodonts, which are the big toothy crushy man, sauropterygians, maybe and maybe Usaurus largus. And these guys are doing a few things. Many are getting broad, developing some kind of armor. Broad. We here at the Skeleton Crew encourage getting broad. Getting broad armor. And kind of the important bit here is that they're making their body, their axial column, very rigid and immobile. And I think, me personally, there's something about the early or middle Triassic where there is some evolutionary pressure that is just, if you are in the water, become a turtle. Make this turtle shape somehow. Like just that is maybe it's good for swimming to have like.
It was the style of the times.
Have like a big rigid body and then paddle limbs. That that's how they were getting around. And all of these lineages, except for the sauropterygians, eat and die at the end of the Triassic period.
Well, and turtles.
Oh, and turtles. Yes, sorry.
They're still around.
Notable living animals, turtles.
Notable living animals, turtles. So I think the sauropterygians...
Could you really call that living, though?
They are charming and have time.
When God sings with his creations, will turtles not be part of the choir?
I do love turtles.
He said the
My
thing!
favorite part
Listen,
of all time.
Good!
That was really funny. Listen,
Well done.
I do like turtles, to be clear. I saved a turtle this summer from the road. I like turtles. I don't think I'd want to live inside my ribcage, though, personally.
What if you could do it for 250 years?
No, I don't want to do it for 25.
Get it out! Get me out of it!
Are you trying to lie about your age on camera? Do you think you're 25 years old?
That's just because it was divided by 10. I'm not 25 years old, and I acknowledge that. Anyway.
Dr. James Napoli, Wunderkind.
Okay, I'm sorry. The long belabored point I'm trying to make here is I think the cool rigid body
in the skeleton
crew. I think the cool rigid body of sauropterygians that we see retained in pliosaurs and plesiosaurs is like a holdover from whatever weird thing was happening in the Triassic, where everything was becoming a turtle for some reason. They're not as extreme as turtles, but the rigid big flat body and then your limbs coming out like that. That's just me. I don't have... If there's been marine reptile viewers, if you watch our channel and you know about marine reptiles, well, you probably get very frustrated with our videos.
I like phrasing it as marine reptile viewers like it's marine reptiles who are watching our channel.
Yeah, our viewers who are marine reptiles.
The marine iguanas and sea turtles who watch the videos. The metric, you are 16% of our viewers.
And the saltwater crocodile, don't forget that one.
Anyway, that's the Fylogenum. I hope you've enjoyed that.
Yes.
I sure did.
I enjoyed
Indeed.
the Fylogenum. Well, what else is there to say about this guy? We promised to return to a point.
We did indeed.
Where is it living? Where was it living?
In jolly old England.
And you know who else was living there?
Mary Anning.
The person who found it.
And it has characteristic English teeth.
Oh,
Which
God.
honestly, like, I do want to... It's been a hot minute since we've engaged Pervert Cam. I do want to get a close look at this guy's teeth.
I think it's lipped, isn't it?
It is lipped.
I'm going to speed it up to try and just get this one to open its mouth and eat a fish rather than like bounce around.
We don't think these things had lips, right? Like this is a
No.
bizarre invention of the game.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
I mean,
for
physically-
the love of... That was...
There we
that
go.
was-
Oh my God! Don't.
Oh, good. Wow, those are not...
Ugh.
They're
No.
kind of prognathous in the front, right?
But they're supposed
There's
to be,
an
like,
attempt.
very prognathous in the front, aren't they?
Hmm.
Yeah, and they're supposed to be
Can we see the palate?
long and interlocking. I guess they are a little bit. It's mostly because
It's covered up with... Yeah. I guess that, like... It looks like there could be a good Plesiosaurus skull in there,
Yeah, under the snake skin.
but it's covered with so much snake skin.
Honestly, I don't hate the palate.
Oh, yes. I was like, what?
Now, Dalton, I'm seeing the light catch something while you rotate it. Are we? Is that like a groove in the top?
Yeah,
of the
there is a groove. There's like a ridge right there.
Oh my goodness, are they correctly reconstructing the united midline choani?
It looks like it opens up. There's like a little divot where it opens right here at the very back of the head.
Enhance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
If I
United
go into-
Midline Choani.
Here, okay, hang on. I can't go into camera.
Fish.
Are you happy, Alex?
I
Are
am
you happy
very
with what
happy.
you've made me do?
I can actually. That's pretty good. I kind of can't believe that there's like a shape on the palette on this one. Okay, so it's not great. It's not perfect, but viewer, you might be confused about why I'm excited about this, besides my interest in palettes. And there's no reason besides. It's because I'm interested in palettes. There is... Do we want to talk about this now? Do we want to talk about the... Might as well, right?
Go ahead. Talk about the palette.
Plesiosaur, so that's plesiosaurs and pliosaurs. They might have a cool thing happening. Now, most reptiles, turtles, lizards, snakes, extinct crocodiles, but not living ones, dinosaurs, etc., their internal nares, or their choani, and we have these. Everything that, all tetrapods have them. Your internal nares. In reptiles, they're at the front of the palate. They open through the roof of the mouth and connect to the nasal capsule. However, there are some groups that do a little funky stuff with this. Mammals, we have what is called a secondary bony palate. You can feel it if you press your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Your front part is your bony part. Your back part is the soft palate, and that is where the choani open. Alligators do this. They have an extensive secondary bony palate. All living crocodilians do this. Some skinks do this. And a handful of sea turtle species do this independently, which is weird.
You can feel around where your choani is for, like, if you breathe in through your nose, you'll feel it get cold around there from the air coming in.
Yes. And for a while, when plesiosaurs were being described and their skulls being described, two small openings on the sides, what we call the lateral sides, so farther from the middle of the skull, two little openings were thought to be the choani. They're really, really small. However, there's a lot of midline contact between elements on the palate of plesiosaurs. It's pretty plate-like. And then back in the skull, under the brain case, there's this big, long, wide opening. And it has kind of it's got a little separating lamina of bone. What is it? What's it doing? It's very strange. But positionally quite similar to alligators and mammals in terms of where it's opening up. And so like two and a half decades ago, so like 25 years ago, maybe a little less than that, I'd have to double check, it was proposed that this is actually the choani, that advanced plesiosaurs, or just plesiosaurs generally, have a secondary bony palate and an opening further nasal passageways underneath the brain case and way back. I think that this makes a lot of sense. The tiny little openings in the front of the palate have been reinterpreted as maybe salt glands or something else, openings for the salt glands. There have been a few proposals. And this is related a little bit to something Scott discovered earlier while perusing the font of knowledge, Wikipedia, which is not how we prepare for our videos.
No, never.
Never. Because this is not on Wikipedia. You could only hear this here, or if you looked up a paper or two. But don't.
Well, if you were looking up papers, you probably wouldn't be watching our videos.
But yes, good. But Scott found that in the Wikipedia article for this thing, it says they can't smell underwater.
Yes. Well, it's more saying that that Romulusaurus could smell underwater and Plesiosaurus couldn't.
I see. And this is based on a paper that's cited or miscited?
Well, so
miscited.
It cites a paper that within that paper makes the comparison to Romulusaurus, and the Romulusaurus information is from a separate paper that is cited within that first paper.
My goodness.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and
So
Romaleosaurus.
not miscited, weirdly cited.
Yeah, it's weirdly cited
Or
in Wikipedia.
poorly cited.
The academic literature is fine.
Good. Okay. So Romaleosaurus is a very early pliosaur, by the way.
Mhm.
If you don't know what that is, viewers. So both sides, early members of both sides of the major plesiosaur trees. But this inference is based on the fact that those little openings I was talking about earlier on the roof of the mouth, and Plesiosaurus are anterior to the.
In Romaleosaurus, they're anterior to the nostril.
Romaleosaurus, they're anterior to the nares.
So
Gotcha.
if you imagine, at the time, they were being interpreted as the internal nares, as the choanae, which is just where that air passage opens. Essentially, that would be in Romaleosaurus. It would be constructed so that the internal opening is in front of the external opening, and is also very small. And the idea of the paper is that as the animal was swimming, water would enter the mouth, and by virtue of the size differential between the holes and the flow of water over the top of the head, water would be drawn up through the roof of the mouth into the internal nostril, goes past it would slow down as it entered that space, and then be exposed to nasal epithelium that could detect molecules and smell, and then it would exit through the top of the skull in the external nares, and the conceit of the paper is that's how Romaleosaurus is smelling underwater, and it also means that it isn't breathing through its nose when it comes up to take a breath, but rather it's just breathing through its mouth.
I see.
And then in the other paper that makes comparison to Plesiosaurus, they're saying that those small openings, the purported choanae that we now think probably aren't choanae, in Plesiosaurus are more directly underneath the nostril, the external nares, and so it would probably not have that same kind of siphoning effect to pull water through it. And so the idea is that, Plesiosaurus isn't smelling underwater, or at least not in the same way as Romaleosaurus. But it should be said at the end of this that all of this is based off of a probably incorrect but not unreasonable supposition to make that those openings are the choanae, which is no longer the favored hypothesis. And I agree, Alex, that it's probably the hole at the back, that it's the choanae.
Yes. Cool. Thank you, Dalton, for that explanation.
So all of that, including the way that Romaleosaurus would have smelled, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Brr. Big. I'm doing the burr.
Yeah,
because
that's sad. I like the idea of it of Plesiosaurus, or at least Romaleosaurus, like backwards smelling. I think
cool
that's
idea.
funny.
And this is where I chime in with human anatomy knowledge.
Uh-oh.
I don't know. Also know why I've lost my voice tonight.
I can't imagine,
because we've been yapping for so long and laughing and yelling. This would not be the only sort of biological siphoning mechanism that uses fluid dynamics like that. A big part of our lymphatic system also uses this. So like lymph fluid drains really slowly because lymph fluid doesn't drain at high pressure. So lymph, for those of you who aren't aware, is the most disgusting name of a tissue in the body or a type of fluid
It's
that
so
exists.
gross.
It's like they discovered it and they were just like, this shit is disgusting. And so therefore,
I don't know, bile's pretty bad.
Bile is bad, but at least bile has like a long history in the literature, This goes back to so long. But they were like, ooh, that's lymph. What's it poolin'? Oh, we're going to call that the Cisterna Chyli. That's like, it's just, they all sound gross. Very
someone
Halloween
named
coded.
Cisterna Chyli.
Name your daughter Cisterna Chyli.
Ew.
Lymph node son or Cisterna.
So anyway.
daughter.
What'd you say?
I said lymph node son or Cisterna Kylie daughter.
Oh my god. I mean, a lymph node that's also not a bad name. That's actually kind of cool almost. But the end result here is that this lymphatic fluid is basically what's collecting all the waste from your body. It's like your body's sewage system because you have fluid to maintain. And we usually think about blood and we think about extracellular fluid and everything. But your cells are going to do things, and there's going to be waste products, and things are going to drain out into your tissues somehow. And if you have fluid just building up in your tissues or between the cells, you're going to have a problem. So we have a specialized third component of the circulatory system called the lymphatic system that drains things back to the heart. Lymph vessels are really porous, so you can actually get entire cells into them. Like the vessel walls have big holes in them to let basically anything in. So you can get huge molecules in. This is actually how fat gets delivered into into the bloodstream as well for delivery. Like fats can go into the lymphatic drainage. So Chyle is actually, it's Chyle, Chyle. Chyle is a special kind of
there's
lymph.
a part of the body just called Chyle.
Well, that's what punches the holes in the. It makes the lymph vessels porous. It punches the holes in the drywall.
It's the part of the body that processes monster energy.
Yeah.
So it turns out that instead of it being like, oh, what was that, a show with the blue germ in it?
Osmosis Jones.
Instead of it being Osmosis Jones, it's like a Midwest household. That we have Chyli, and we have Kyle.
That's true.
And they're both spelled weird, I imagine.
Yeah.
And there's Cisterna.
So Chyle is lymph fluid. Lymph fluid is usually clear. Chyle is what happens to lymph fluid when all of the fats from the intestines get added to it. Because they drain out of the intestines and they actually go into the lymph system, and they drain into the Cisterna chyli, which is where lymph turns into Chyle. And when the lymph turns into Chyle, it just becomes this opaque, milky fluid that gets dumped right into your bloodstream to deliver fatty acids to your body for metabolism.
Wait, so what's chyme? The CHYM.
Oh,
Chyme
that's the
saliva, right?
No. Chyme is, if memory serves, it is the mass of chewed food and saliva that your tongue then passes down your throat.
No, that's a bolus. That's just a food bolus. The chyme is when it's passing through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna ask that some of these names are changed.
They are really gross names.
Food bolus. I like food bolus.
Here's a fun thing. When lymph drainage back to your bloodstream is blocked or like impeded, the chyme can just leak out of your lymphatic vessels into your pleural space around the lungs, and you can have a situation called chylothorax, which is when there's too much chyle in your sorry, it's not chyme, it's chyle. I'm sending you guys a picture of what chyle looks like just so that you understand.
I'm expecting Midwest emo. What Chyle
looks like.
That's 3 vials of Chyle.
Dude.
Okay, but hang on. Vials of Chyle is actually a very good band name. I hate to make that joke, but that's not even a joke. Vials of Chyle, like I can see the CD at Target. That's disgusting. That's awful.
Yeah, this is awful.
Those are vials of Chyle.
Chyle, yeah.
I'm gonna stop looking at them because
such
it's making me
a good
physically
band
ill.
name. Holy.
Don't worry, Alex. That's being delivered directly to your bloodstream at all times.
Great.
Oh,
How do I avoid that?
How do I turn that off?
Do I just die?
Can I get it out of me? Oh, can you get a transfusion like that guy who posted the liquid gold on Twitter the other day?
Maybe.
After I get a Chyle transfusion. Stop! Look out, drywall! Here I go!
So anyway, here's the cool thing about Chyle. Ready? So it's coming up a structure called your thoracic duct, which is also bad mouthfeel of a name.
It's the most normal thing we've said in like 5 minutes.
That's true. Also, just to note, these are so porous. That's why, disease material usually winds up in the lymphatic system, and why the lymphatic system is also very responsible for an immune response. And it's also why the lymphatic system is usually how metastatic cancer gets around your body. Because the cancer cells can actually get into the lymphatic vessels. They're large enough that they can enter them, and then they will slowly migrate. It's also why, like, if cancer were metastasizing through your bloodstream, which I guess like blood cancers do, but like if it were going through the arterial system, metastasis would take like seconds, right?
Thank God it doesn't do that.
Right. Lymphatic drainage is slow, and this is part of why metastatic cancer generally takes a long time to develop. There's actually a trail of lymph nodes that go up the armpit, or kind of from the breast or the outer chest into the armpit and then out. And you can actually track very closely not only the progression of metastatic breast cancer, but your life expectancy based on which pocket of lymph nodes they've made it to. Where if you're in the first pocket, you have a very high chance of recovery. If you're in the third pocket, you will die within 5 years. There's no documented survival after that point.
goodness.
Yeah. No, I mean, the lymphatic system is very interesting, and we don't talk about it a lot because it's mostly very hard to dissect, because the structures are very flimsy and very small a lot of the time. Anyway, so as you're going back into the bloodstream, the cool thing is the thoracic duct is coming up like this right next to your aorta, right against your vertebrae. It comes up like this, and then it loops up into the left. This is my left because it's a mirror image, and down to a junction of the subclavian vein and your left brachiocephalic vein. So there's a vein coming down that's getting your jugulars from the head and neck, and there's one getting your arm, and it's right there. So the blood flow is coming back that way, and the thoracic duct is actually looping up and around to enter the back of that, and that's how you get back into the bloodstream. Now, the reason that it has to arc like that is that lymphatic drainage is at so slow and at such low pressure that otherwise there's no way for you to fight the gravity to get the stuff up to your heart. We're vertically oriented animals, right? So what has happened is that evolutionarily, we've put the thoracic duct at this point because it's where there's negative pressure because all the venous blood is moving down toward the heart. So it's actually sucking the chyle up constantly just by hydrostatic pressure. I actually think this is one of the coolest anatomical systems I've ever heard. Like it's like, when you try to if you're trying to suck gas out of a car engine, like when you suck on the hose and then you lower it,
make a siphon.
You make a siphon. That's what's happening. It's anatomically setting up a siphon by putting the opening high in an area where there's fluid pressure that's pulling down and creating a vacuum. So it's like a straw that's just sucking up the fluid so that it can fight gravity.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
but instead of sucking up something cool like gasoline, it's sucking up chyle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because venous drainage in general is really tough. Like venous drainage is way higher pressure than lymphatic drainage, and venous drainage is not high enough pressure to get back to your heart unassisted. That's why your veins have valves, and why muscle contractions are actually pumping blood up from your legs and lower extremities constantly. This is why, if you sit down for 18, 24 hours or something without moving or any muscular activity, you're very liable to get a deep vein thrombosis, which is just what your blood sits for long enough in the veins that it pools together. And I have to always say that phrase like that video that Scott's laughing about right now.
I am going to get a deep vein thrombosis.
I am going to have a deep vein thrombosis.
I think about that at least once a week.
I involuntarily, while lecturing about this the other day, just involuntarily lowered my voice half an octave to say a deep vein thrombosis.
DVT, deep vein thrombosis.
Yeah.
I simply do not understand.
We'll show you afterwards. It's really funny.
But yeah, it's a deep vein thrombosis is just when your deep veins have the blood pool in them, and so the blood clots to form what we call scientifically a thrombus, and then that can go back to your lungs or your heart and cause a heart attack.
That's a Rick and Morty word. I'm sorry.
A thrombus.
Okay. Thrombus.
But also the phrase scientifically a thrombus.
Scientifically a thrombus.
Hey, the subtitle of this episode of the Skeleton Crew is the crew say James says a bunch of medical words that sound like posts.
This is that. I don't know if it's a Vine or a TikTok or what, but that video where it's talking about fish, and it's the auto-tune voice or whatever, something about the...
Oh, yeah.
what is it?
The scrumbus with its nut sack or whatever. Yeah, that.
Sack, yeah.
Nut sack.
But, sorry, anyway, about the throm.
People get them on flights sometimes, like flying to Australia or something. If you don't get up and walk around, that's why they tell you, you really need to get up at some point. Hopefully people would have to, use the bathroom. But if you just sit motionless and don't use your muscles or don't contract them at all, your blood can pool in your veins. Anyway, we have mechanisms to get venous blood flow back. The idea that chyle and lymph are draining at such low pressure that you actually need to develop a siphon just to bring it back to the heart is, I think, fascinating. I think it's great.
Is this happening in Plesiosaurus?
Maybe
we get on this point again.
It presumably had lymph.
Well, we got on this point from the siphon mechanism that probably doesn't exist in Romaleosaurus.
Yeah, but it does exist in you, and now you know it.
Oh my gosh.
What else is there to say about this animal?
Well, Plesiosaurus. We've talked about basically, I think, all there is to really say about it. But there's something to say about the person who found it, and that person is somebody you probably have heard of, even though there's a lot of statements to the contrary. which is Mary Anning, who is very deservedly becoming canonized within the realm of like very, very famous fossil collectors, because she did an amazing amount of work documenting and collecting fossils from Lyme Regis in Britain and finding probably like the first really good Mesozoic skeletons of anything.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Right? Yeah.
Like she just recently got that statue made of her in Lyme Regis, right?
Did.
It was
She
like
did.
just like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, like my joke before is kind of because I've heard Mary Anning described as a very like kind of obscure figure who's not part of the historiography of paleontology. I don't really feel that's accurate because she was in pretty much every book I had as a kid. But
It's almost like a Van Gogh thing of like, but
right,
but
not famous during her life. Although she was very well known during her life too.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, early paleontologists from all over Europe sought her out specifically. I mean, I think one of the royalty of the Holy Roman Empire actually bought fossils from her directly, like went to her shop to buy them. I mean, she was a really, really prolific collector, probably knew more about Lyme Regis and its fossil beds than anybody, and is really the person who first found really, really good fossils of anything from the Mesozoic. They weren't dinosaurs yet. She's working in marine deposits. I think most of what she found were ichthyosaurs, but plesiosaurs were also very common.
And also Dimorphodon, if memory serves.
Well, yes, I mean, there's not many of those, though. There's only one of those. But yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, her work was she's mostly remembered for these marine reptiles.
Mm-hmm.
Is I guess what I'm going for. Yeah. It's just worth. It's just kind of worth mentioning that, especially in the early history of paleontology, there was often a dichotomy between people who were collecting and people who were kind of part of the scientific establishment, because this is also, and I think important to recognize, like, prior to there really being academically appointed scientists. Like, this is still very much the gentleman scientist era where you were just like a wealthy guy and you did science as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did Nature exist yet? I think Nature is one of the oldest scientific journals.
I, for a quarter second, forgot that you were referencing the journal, and I was like, yeah,
Nature was founded in 1869, so this is well before Nature existed.
This was back when you had, like, a middle child or weird nephew who couldn't, like, cut it as a doctor, or was not chaste enough to be in the church. And, they need a little hobby.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there were publications, but like the institution of science as we practice it now kind of fixed in the the mid 1800s to the late 1800s, with the like establishment of these like scientific journals and the formal peer review process and all of that. Sorry, Scott, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, I was gonna. I thought we were done with that point there, and I was gonna transition into the thing of that. And I'll just say what I was going to say, and maybe you can tie it in, of the thing about her not being allowed in the Royal Society or whatever it was.
Yes, and like, so these Royal Societies did publish scientific research. Like, that was kind of that was effectively the outlet. I don't know if they did like peer review formally at that time.
Well, weren't they mostly publications of things that were read aloud at meetings?
I think
so.
so.
That kind of the format of kind of publicizing science at the time is
you'd go to the meeting
and read it aloud.
Proceedings of, and then that's why part of the reason it's a pain in the ass to find old papers is that a lot of them aren't really papers. They're these proceedings of the whatever meeting of whatever.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also part of the reason they're really short. I would say part of the reason they're short and not always very helpful because they're not actually papers. They're usually not. Some of them like aren't even written by the person who presented the work. Like, they're presented by someone or written by someone who was there. At least the ones that I've read with Cope, a lot of the time it's Cope described X, Y, and Z. Like, for some of them, and it's like, yeah,
right. Like, somebody's recording it, like they're just writing down what he's saying. Like a stenographer.
Like a stenographer. Yeah, thank you. That was the word I was trying to find.
Yeah, no. So exactly, it's things that are read aloud, and like they're also kind of in parallel. Like, occasional, like sometimes they're just being published as books that are being like sold directly to libraries and institutions. Museums also would have like their catalogs sometimes, and a lot of things get described in like an inventory of a collection where like that'll ultimately be the source for many modern species, especially. Like, I remember at some point trying to find the naming of some crocodilian. I was like, when was this named? And it was just by, like, I think Owen or maybe Boulanger, like, in a old museum catalog where it's just like, this specimen, this is that crocodilian. And then, like, you know, it's like, it's big, but it's a little different than the saltwater crocodile. Like, that's the whole thing. But yeah, like the entire idea of like publishing a journal article, like this is something that kind of develops and is, I'd say, more or less in place by the beginning of the 1900s. But I mean, like the AMH like paleo library, I remember occasionally just going up there to read, and like I'll find like a huge volume by Cope where it's just like the reptiles of North America, and it's just like each one is like a paragraph description.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because like we focus so much on types in paleo. I have no idea what the type specimen of most modern animals is.
It's funny when you just like learn about, like, again, like I'm with you that the types of modern animals, I always just kind of think of just like, oh crap, that's here. It's like a while ago when I found out that here at Harvard we had the holotype of the Florida panther, and it's like, huh,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Maybe by the time this video's up, I'll have a preprint up. I keep saying it. I mean, almost
Fingers
certainly
crossed.
it should go up tomorrow. But there are, like, I'm working a lot on crocodilian ontogeny. I certainly don't have the type specimen of the American alligator.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I want to make
I
a
don't know where
point
that
relevant to
Yeah.
what I'm working on, which also deals with holotypes, but in fossils. The difference, like the reason that a holotype is like important but not as important in neontology as it is in paleontology is for like animals alive today, we have much more data available to actually be confident about which things belong to which species. Like, depending on what species concept you use, the bottom line is, in most cases, you can go back to where you found that one and find more of them, and you can observe them interbreeding, or we can collect their DNA and compare that. And we have other methods of testing, like what species belong or what animals belong to the same species. With a fossil, the problem is really the only specimen you can ever be confident 100% belongs to a given species is the holotype. And that's because unless you're finding that two fossils in the same hole that are identical, you don't really know how much time or space exists between these two fossil animals when they were alive. And because a lot of animals that are different species are really morphologically or anatomically similar, but different species, without the additional information, it's really hard to tell fossil species apart because, on the one hand, they might be similar because they're the same species, but they might also be separated by 2 million years, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. They could technically be distinct species. So when you're dealing with fossil taxonomy, that's why we have to rely on the holotypes. Or theoretically, best practice is to rely on the holotypes when making taxonomic assessments, because we have no other information available.
And I mean, I would say epistemologically it should be important for modern animals too. I think it's just like kind of as a matter of practice, it's just not done. Like again, I have no idea what the type specimen of the American alligator is. It's probably in the museum in Paris because it's it was named by a French anatomist. So maybe I can get to like actually go see it. But it's not easy to find out what that information is.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably it's an American alligator.
Yeah.
It is always possible, however, that it's not.
That's
It's possible.
the secret.
Well, like, right, because if we're just all calling that American alligator and we haven't actually been like, especially if we haven't genotyped the holotype to like do our molecular systematics in comparison to it, it's possible the holotype was some other kind of animal, the locality was misreported, and that technically the holotype is a caiman or something.
Or like what happened with crocodiles.
Like,
what happened with the Phans crocodiles?
Right,
with the I don't remember. It's the Nile crocodile, right?
Yeah,
where there's the Nile one and there was a cryptic one or whatever.
Yes, there was. So it's the Nile crocodile and the sacred crocodile, as I like to call it. The common name that's been picked up is I think the West African crocodile, right?
I don't know.
So what's interesting is
sacred crocodile sounds much cooler.
I like that better, and it was called that because it turns out that probably the crocodiles that were kept in temples to like Sobek and other deities in ancient Egypt. And I mean throughout time, because when the Greeks moved in, they also started doing other things. The city Crocodilopolis, which was made famous by Assassin's Creed Origins, a fantastic game, by the way, had had a temple in it where they would keep crocodiles. Nile crocodiles are extremely aggressive.
They had a temple where they kept crocodiles in Crocodilopolis?
They did.
Was the city named before that, or did they find the crocodile temple there?
I think the temple existed before. The Greeks called it Crocodilopolis and kept the temple going. So I think it's yes. Nile crocodiles are extremely aggressive and not very easily kept tame. West African crocodiles are sacred crocodiles, which the scientific name is Crocodilosuchus, which just means crocodile. Are much more docile, and so the supposition is probably that ancient Egyptians were able to tell them apart and would preferentially take these because they were kind of just easier to keep. You couldn't really deal with a large Nile crocodile. But what's cool about this is two things. One, it was morphologically recognized. It was named in 1807. And then it was mistakenly lumped into the Nile crocodile for a long time on the presumed basis that they were morphologically indistinguishable. So, fast forward to the 2000, early, the mid 2000s, and you start to see molecular evidence from populations of crocodiles in North Africa and West Africa they're separate. Okay. And
sorry, I thought you were finishing Marianning stuff.
No. It is what's very interesting about the West African crocodile, because that's what we're talking about now. They're not even the sister taxon of the Nile crocodile. They're not each other's closest relative.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is not, they're morphologically almost indistinguishable because they're so closely related. The West African crocodile is actually the outgroup to the Nile crocodile, which is then most closely related to all of the North American crocodilians.
I'll be.
Right. So their similarities are perhaps even more sobering, because this is not a case where they've evolved as one lineage that's split really recently. Their divergence is actually pretty deep. It's just that Nile crocodiles have remained pretty plesiomorphic relative to all the other things, presumably.
So backing, one might say. I'm gonna.
The other interesting thing about, another case of that is the example that I always use of lions and tigers for these species limitation issues. Lions and tigers aren't sister taxa either. They're almost indistinguishable morphologically. They're not each other's closest relative. Lions are more closely related to leopards. So, paleontology is hard. Read my preprint. It'll be a good one, I promise. But anyway, Marianning.
Yes.
When I'm zoning out in our videos, when I'm obviously not paying attention, I'm mentally in Crocodilopolis. I'm trying to astral project back into a crocodile being cared for in Crocodilopolis.
God,
you know that
be a better place to be.
You know that phenomena that happens when incredibly rich people get a big estate and then give it a goofy name. If that ever happened to James, it would be Crocodilopolis, is where James lives.
100%. I would have a huge crocodile pit.
To live.
Now, what I don't... I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the crocodiles still because...
Yeah, we know.
Because I'm more interested in them than plesiosaurs. When did they diverge, the African ones from the American ones? They diverged in the end, toward the end of the Miocene. And so this also is going. This must imply that Nile crocodiles swam, or something ancestral to them and to the North American crocodilians, literally swam across the Atlantic, when it was large. I was wondering if it was deep enough that the Atlantic was much narrower, but no.
No,
yeah.
It's I was talking about this with Dalton, just because something I know.
You said his name. I'm sorry. I was of all people, Dalton. Believe it or not, I was speaking with Dalton about this.
Known slack John moron.
Yeah, no, you said Dalton's name like you say mine. Jesus.
Hey, all right, okay. I promise he means nothing to me, Scott. You're special.
There's only one person I subhumanly degrade around here.
Correct. No, that's not true. No, Dalton. I was mentioning this to Dalton in my in just my surveying of all named things I can get my little grubby fingers on Wikipedia. Like basically all of the living animal diversity is diverging in the Miocene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like almost everything that exists now is part of some radiation that's happening then.
I have a gut instinct to not trust any genus that is around today that is older than the Miocene.
I think you're
Like
right.
that is just to me when Earth became as it is now, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
It's
really
really
increasingly seems like everything is just like, that's where, if you go back to the Miocene, you're probably like, yeah, things look pretty much the same.
There had to be some kind of like that's when either the modern climate set in or just something's clicking. And I'm sure it's cyclical. I'm sure like it's like basically every 10 or 15 million years, like that happens. There's like kind of the like that thing that's like, this is the new fauna. Old fauna, get out of here.
Well, I mean, in the Miocene, it's probably two things. Like, one is that is when the grasslands start, and
Yeah.
so like you are creating the modern fauna, like, or the modern ecosystem. But it's also, and this is really interesting. So there's this mid-Miocene climate optimum. I did a project back early in my PhD that was heavily flawed, and I would like to revisit it. But it suggested that periods of warm and cold snaps in Earth's history are related to pulses of diversification. It was actually very interesting. So it was like, I was wondering if it was just like when you get warm, you get more. It seems to be every time you snap in one direction, you get a huge burst of diversification at that point. At least in the Cenozoic.
That would be consistent with the proposal that like cooling changes in oxygen levels are responsible for diversifications in like the Ordovician.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, the mid-Miocene climate optimum is cool to me because there's this paper by my old undergraduate mentor, Christine Janis, who this video will come out after this point, so I can say received the Romer Simpson Lifetime Achievement in Paleontology Award this year.
Oh,
Yes,
super
congratulations.
cool.
I've got a 2-year streak now of writing recommendation letters for the winning person for that.
Oh, wow.
So I consider myself something of a kingmaker, you know? Or a queenmaker in this case.
Always a bridesmaid,
Absolutely.
never a bride.
Yes. And Christine Janis is just, I mean, she's was an amazing influence on me like early in my paleo career as well, and continues to be, because she is just one of the like raw smartest people I know in the field. Like just really, really, really analytical and very like, it's not even that she's like exceptionally like quantitative in her approach. It's not like she's doing amazing math, but she's just got a wonderful intuitive sense to figure out like what is a reasonable or unreasonable hypothesis, or how you should look at things. And so she did this really interesting study, and I'm bringing it up now because we always say that the diversity of the fossil record is lower than what we have right now. And there's one very weird period where it's not, and that's the mid-Miocene, when specifically in North America, there are more coexisting browsing ungulate species than there are in the modern African savanna. We can tell that that's a pattern that maintains over a long period of time. It doesn't seem to be driven by time averaging. It's just, there are more, like you're looking what's now like Nebraska or Kansas, like what's preserved at Ashfall, right?
Mm-hmm.
These ecosystems are richer, just at least in terms of the ungulates, than the Serengeti. Which is crazy because like is right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy because that is like the most diverse large animal fauna we know of right now.
Now, does that persist through like the Pliocene and Pleistocene?
No, it does not. And so they speculated, and I think there's a lot of evidence in favor of this. There's a few papers. They suggested that this was a biological signal showing that there was high CO2 locally in the mid-Miocene climate optimum. That was actually like modern global warming, the climate optimum, which is when it became like very warm for about 4 million years in the mid-Miocene, was driven by CO2 emissions. And at the time, geochemical proxies did not indicate that, and they got into big fights with geochemists because they were suggesting something the proxies didn't show. Guess what the proxies now show?
The proxies were wrong.
The proxies were wrong. They were, yeah. So now they're finding evidence for a spike in CO2 in the mid-Miocene. And their idea was, if you have higher CO2, you are going to have more plant life, just in terms of raw biomass and possibly plant diversity. And therefore, you will be able to sustain a higher population of any individual species, and therefore presumably also a higher diversity of different species all coexisting. Now, could there be other explanations? Possibly, and it could be that the Serengeti is abnormally depauperate. But it is really true that you're getting a lot of things that are pretty ecologically similar there. So, speaking of famous and influential women in paleontology, Christine Janis was a huge influence on me. Mary Anning was a huge influence on many other people. And I think one thing that I didn't really know about her, despite her appearing in a lot of my kids' books about dinosaurs and prehistoric life growing up, is just how sought after she was as a source of information by all of these gentlemen scientists. Like, I think it speaks to a very complicated narrative of like the way that sexism and paternalism and patriarchy have like manifested in history, that all of these wealthy men would seek her out specifically and travel to visit her and speak about fossils with her and have her teach them how to find fossils in the rock, do field work better, prepare fossil material, all of that. And still, like, women were not allowed into the Geological Society of London meetings, like literally not allowed in. Right, it's a much more complicated thing than the like, I think if you were to make like a pithy kind of movie about it or something, you just have a bunch of like male scientists be like, ew, no, we're not going to speak to you. But like, no, they respected her intellect tremendously and wanted her as a source of information, and still gave her no access into the scientific establishment at all, which is something that, I mean, from surviving writings that we have from her, is something that was, you know, extremely painful to her. So I think it's something very interesting there, and I don't mean to say it's complicated in the way that a lot of people say that when they're implying like I don't want to take a stand or something like that. Like, you heard it here, patriarchy is not a good thing. Right, it's bad that this happened. But I really didn't ever expect to learn that she was that valued as a contributor to the field in her own right in that context, while also still being
and also at the time. Like, I at least partially thought that, kind of like what I said earlier, that it was something that, like, her value was really discovered after the fact.
Yeah, no, I mean, she was well known at the time. Again, I'm going to look this up. It was some European royalty who specifically went to go see her for, like, a while. Let me see. It was Frederick Augustus II of Saxony.
Him?
Yes.
My favorite.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay.
He's my favorite of Saxony.
He was the king of Saxony. That's.
I'm not joking that he's like a minor king. I don't know any European royalty because I'm above that.
Oh, I see.
We beat them in a war. We don't have to know who they are.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I mean, like, she was just such an important figure in the like early development of paleontology as a science because, like, I mean, Cuvier is important, and the fossils that were being discovered in the Paris Basin were important, but these are all like mammal fossils. Like, I think this is when paleontology is truly
mammal fossils getting derogatory,
right? No. Well, you know what I mean. Like, part of the reason Cuvier was able to, I mean, I think it's interesting from the perspective of how science advances, right? Like, I'm pretty skeptical of any ideas about like traditional folklore anywhere in the world being like directly informed by fossils, where people are finding the fossils and saying like, I'm not saying people didn't find them, and I'm not saying that they didn't even recognize them for being like remains of extinct life. But I mean specifically like, the griffin was Protoceratops, or dragons were theropod fossils or something. Like,
you
don't find things looking like that in the field. That's just
you've pushed, like, I used to believe that, and then I had a chat with you, and I was like, oh, yep,
yeah, right. No, I mean, I'm very skeptical of that. And paleontology was one of the last sciences to develop, I think, partially because you had to develop a lot of knowledge about comparative anatomy and a lot of knowledge of geology to even begin to do it. And I think Cuvier was lucky in that the fossils he was mostly dealing with were like, these were primarily mammal fossils from the Cenozoic that were more or less directly comparable with modern mammals, and so he was able to understand something about what they were beyond like them being just extinct monsters, right? And you know, I mean, we see like there's that famous illustration of you know, it's called Duria Antiquior, which means the more ancient Dorson. And it's this. I'll put it in chat, but I'm sure we can all see it in our heads right now. Like, clearly, we're getting into a point in paleontology where things are just, we're getting back to the point where it's like it's a world of monsters, right?
Yeah, it's demons.
Right, demons, all killing each other in the water.
As portrayed recently in that antediluvian a short film on YouTube, which everyone should go watch, because it really, it's the only thing I've ever seen that like encapsulates kind of how a lot of these animals really are depicted. Of they're just these dumb brutes, barely able to recognize anything around them besides they'll bump into something and bite it.
I'm not familiar with the short film, but I'll watch it.
Oh, I'll send it to you after. It's like 3 minutes. It literally just came out like the other day. It was like 2-3 weeks ago. Really cool little animated thing that James, I think you would also very much like.
I'm interested to watch it. So yeah, I think it's important to recognize the importance of finding like all of these really good, mostly complete, like often articulated fossils, because I don't know how we would have been able to really start interpreting more fragmentary material without knowing something about what these things were like. Like Amelia talked about with Mosasaurus, like it was a disarticulated skull, right? That's the type specimen.
Yeah, that may or may not even be all one animal.
Right, and that was thought to be maybe a whale.
Maybe a whale, maybe a crocodile, yeah.
Right. So having
meat in the middle, you got
right, exactly. So you make it a mosasaur instead. Often paleontology proceeds through these like keystone discoveries that then completely change the way you look at other things. Like Deinonychus is probably a good example of that. Like we had theropods. The information for a theropod bird link was there. It wasn't made without Deinonychus. I don't know how paleontology would have developed had, there not been a collector as talented and dedicated as Mary Anning working in these areas to really like get these fossils out there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the lasting tragedy of all of it, and maybe tragedy is not even the right word, is just her exclusion from the scientific establishment by the people who were studying by the people who were studying the things she had found, and in many cases were learning a lot from her too.
All right. Well, why don't we finish this up by talking a bit about the actual depiction of it right here?
A good idea.
Because this was a controversial design when it first came out. Namely, it's a snake.
It's a
like,
snake.
It has a corn snake head. And it shouldn't. Very much not. It is kind of funny that like it is a relatively, like I believe I made the comment earlier that it is a relatively skeletally rigorous plesiosaurus. Like it seems like the proportions are pretty okay. If anything, the tail might be a little bit long, but I'm not super familiar with plesiosaurus specifically, or at least, well, I'm not super familiar with actual plesiosaurus specifically. I've worked on things, as this is a old taxon, things that have historically been called plesiosaurus that have turned out not to be. But if anything, I think that like the flipper proportions might be a little wrong. I think that it might have. I think the plesiosaurus specifically should have much longer front flippers than back flippers. But
I'm doing a paleontology.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Oh no.
There's an image of the Plesiosaurus holotype, which is fancily and handily preserved essentially in this position.
Oh, perfect.
And I'm just doing some hand calipers from one monitor to the other. And I'm not horribly displeased with the proportions of this.
Oh, fair enough. It does at least kind of look like the back flippers should be a bit longer.
Not by a whole lot, though. And in the holotype, it's missing the distal phalanges. Like, just barely on the one arm that it does have.
I think, if anything, the neck might be a little long.
That's
compared to the
fair.
body.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
not
I can
like-
see that.
It's not upsettingly disproportionate.
No, but yeah. So this is a case where like the soft tissue reconstruction really is kind of doing the skeleton of this beast a little bit of a disservice, because we do have some body outlines and skin impressions of plesiosaurs. Now, granted, they aren't Plesiosaurus; it's Mauriciosaurus, and that one again. It is a late Cretaceous plesiosaur, but so quite a lot of time difference between the two of these. But at least on the skin impressions of this guy, they show very small scales kind of uniformly. And so I wouldn't expect even an early member like this, that also, again, to tie it back into the beginning of the video, is not that close to lizards, to have such a lizard snaky looking like big old scale pattern on the head like this. And also I wouldn't expect it to have this much extraoral tissue.
No.
No, because that's the squam of squamata, is the special scales that they have relative to other reptiles, and snakes in particular, but some other lizards as well. You can correct me, Dalton, if I'm wrong. Like, the head scale pattern is really diagnostic.
It is, yeah, for a lot of lizards.
Are there any... What lizards is it not?
Well, some lizards don't have these big, cephalic scales. They've got smaller tubercle scales.
I see.
But anything where it has kind of a pattern like this, of like big labial scales, big scales over the top of the head, those scale patterns are usually diagnostic, often to the species.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we have no reason to suspect that plesiosaurs had them. I choose to believe that this is the developers throwing a bone to the result that sometimes, and less frequently now, but more often in like the early 2000s and early 2010s, some analyses were finding plesiosaurs on the lepidosaur stem.
Awful. Why?
I don't actually know. I don't know what characters were putting them there, but they were winding up there occasionally, and sometimes I think often with turtles, as a Pantestodines group, sister to lepidosaurs. Yeah, it's not an unheard of thing. I don't think it's correct, but I'm also not. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on anything with it phylogenetically, but maybe they're throwing a bone to that. But no, there's no reason to suspect that they had these big platy scales over the head. The rest of the body, the scales are probably also too big, but that's not. I think I don't even know if that's really a deliberate choice or so much as it's a consequence of how these things are textured.
I might say I think it might be at least a little bit of a deliberate choice. Dalton, do we have Attenborosaurus in this lagoon?
Do. They've been hiding, but they're in here. Hang on.
Because Attenborosaurus is...
Oh, I mean flawless.
Like... Flawless victory.
Okay, the scales are still relatively large.
I think that's just kind of... There's just a size at which if they rendered them any smaller, they wouldn't look like scales.
Mm-hmm.
That's my guess, is that it's just tech.
That's fair.
Because I feel like when we were looking at it earlier, I was like thinking about it, and like that's different.
It is different.
That is just snake skin, or not even snake. It's weird. It is different from the Attenborosaurus, though. So whatever it is deliberate. Like the size, maybe not, but the shape is, and that's interesting to me from a design standpoint.
They gave it a little tail. Little like fluky guy, little fin, which I like.
Big fan of that. Like there is a lot of things that I do like about it, and like I think that the snake head is kind of aesthetically pleasing. It is so, as you were saying, like that scalation pattern is so lizard, so snake, that it almost looks like they had the body of one animal and just literally stuck a corn head corn snake head at the end of it. Like it does not even read plesiosaur to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, the only thing I could say is that if they are somehow allied with turtles, I could see this being intended to be the large cephalic plates of like sea turtles.
Yeah.
Also possible.
Yeah,
But
but the eyes are very much snake. Like this is based on.
No, I mean,
100%.
and I mean, like, I agree. It's clearly like a garter snake or a corn snake. Like, it reminds me of the one who's just over there, off screen. But I could make the case. But like this, I react to this very much how I do to like the Minmai design, where it's like it's just a turtle. And this is just a snake, and it doesn't feel particularly right for the animal, especially when it transitions really quickly to like normal tubercular scales.
Yeah, and especially when frequently whenever I make my parks and I make a Jurassic Coast exhibit and have these guys next to Attenborosaurus. Wow, it is not flattering to these guys.
No, it's not. It really does sometimes feel like they just chose things that they would be nice to.
Yeah. Well, this was another one like Liopleurodon that for a while when it came out, when they announced the game, and it was before the final movie had come out, I was convinced, oh, this must be a movie design. And if it was a movie design, actually, it'd be one of the better ones. It'd be a weird, wrong choice to put these scales on it, but otherwise, it's not bad. But I was like, oh, this is probably from the movie, so they had some universal input on why it's got kind of an ugly factor. But no, not in the movie.
Nope, it's ugly all on its own.
And the other thing that I'll say before we kick it over to the species viewer, speaking of ugly all on its own, I dislike almost every skin and color pattern for this guy. I don't think almost any of them actually look that good.
It's tricky to find a good one.
I liked that when we had kind of the dark blue with kind of the yellow spots.
Yeah. The dark green, like really dark body colors work, except for the reds.
Yeah, the reds don't really work. I don't think a lot of the greens work that well. And the other thing that I'm not the biggest fan of is I kind of would have liked a bit more counter shading on these guys. I think that especially my go-to, as I've said in some of our other episodes, of me being kind of boring with my marine reptiles and making a lot of them just kind of dark and counter shaded and sometimes even removing the patterns from them, really doesn't work with this guy, because I think like the all black like Svalbard skin pattern for it makes it just look melanistic. Like I don't even think it's counter shaded. It's just black. And it looks bad, and like it makes me sad, because like there's a bunch of cool colors and patterns and stuff you could do with plesiosaurs, and this guy, like the pattern is also, it's so minimal. Like the spots are so tiny, and then it has this like weird very thin exclamation point little saddle thing right down the midline of its back, but only barely, so you can only see it from directly overhead. And it's like, it's so weird. It's like the least patterned one.
It would have been interesting if they just committed to the snake bit and patterned them after sea snakes. Like that would have then kicked ass. Like that would have been, I would have liked that a whole lot better. Realistic it is. At least they'd look cool. Because sea snakes are overall mostly well-colored animals.
Yeah.
Oh god, that one. I think this is in the Red Lobster one. We said this, I believe, in the Lost episode of this. But this one looks to me like he has a very bad sunburn, or like a pig roasting over a fire.
Well, I'm the one who said the thing about the pig roasting over
You
a
said
fire,
that, yeah.
because it makes me hungry.
But you're right. He looks like he's about to blister.
Yeah.
It feels like you'd tap on it and it would make a nice hollow sound, and it would bend
rip
and
the
it would crack.
zipper off and eat it.
It's like the turkey from Christmas Vacation. It would just explode steam and crust.
It's like you should give him a big slap on the back.
Leave a handprint there.
It looks like me after we went whale watching and forgot to wear sunscreen.
Don't do that. That's
really? That was a mistake. Shelby and I both got sunburned.
Oh my gosh!
But just on our faces.
I was about to say, were you whale watching topless? Let's go.
That's probably a business venture that would make money, topless whale watching.
The whales are new. Why can't we be?
Damn it!
Yeah,
Damn it! You beat me. I was just thinking that.
Meet them where they're at. They'll come closer to the.
Well, why don't we meet these guys where they're at, which is the species viewer.
Certainly. Merchandising.
Merchandise.
Where the real money is made. It will be a 30-minute video. Internet.
Okay. God, this one looks like a plastic toy. This looks like something you throw into a pool that then dives and you have to go get it.
Yeah, I went when I was playing around a little earlier, and the best color combination that I could find, because I took some pictures of it, because this is another one where there's no good photos of it, so I'm gonna have to be wildlife photographer. It was like the Limpopo skin or whatever, and then no, it's the purpley one. Yeah, it was that pattern specifically. It was the one you had, the black one. I liked that one. But like,
unfortunately, I'm in the driver's seat, and I really like this.
Fair.
That's fine. I don't dislike it. It's just very silly.
And you could see with the black one there that it's just all black all over, and it's just like,
I kind of like this yellow belly, green top situation.
What are you, some kind of yellow belly, green top situation?
What I don't like about it is that it looks like it could be peeled along the seam.
It does.
That I don't like. If it graded, like I like a yellow, like the yellow and green color scheme. It's that it's such a sharp boundary between them, and it's following like the weird like body seam that they gave it, and so it gives turtle, and it gives turtle in that it reminds me of anatomy class and what we had to do to the rib cage, which is not something I enjoyed doing.
You didn't like that part?
I don't know who would. It's a horrible thing to do. Huh?
You didn't like that part?
No, it was kind of funny in a horrible, morbid way, because it's like, wow, that just looks like a turtle shell sitting there on the table. But anyways, I digress. I'm torn on this one, because I don't hate it, but I really don't like it. I don't like it in the way that, like, I don't particularly like plesiosaurs from certain angles. It's specifically like from above or below, where it's like he very clearly skips leg day and it's like all pecs all the time, and I just hate it because it looks like a cartoon. I don't love the snake look to it. Like I said, I wish they would just commit to it. If you're gonna make it look like a snake, make it look like a snake and have more fun with the colors. The colors really suck. But the silhouette of the animal is good, and from afar, it's fine. So I think I will give it a B. I'm not impressed, but I'm not upset.
I agree, low B. Same reasoning, basically. I don't like the design decision with the head. I think I would probably like it better if it weren't for that. But it's just kind of uninspiring otherwise. And like seeing Attenborosaurus, I know they could have made it very pretty. Yeah, low B.
I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Man. It's... Honestly, like, oh man, I'm really torn between high C and a low B, because yeah, I think I'll have to go high C. Like I like a lot of its social animations and stuff. I'm happy it's in the game because it's weirdly one of those animals that is the name bearer of a group but almost never actually gets depicted. Because it's always a little bit of a surprise that because everyone always thinks that like elasmosaurus or styxosaurus and stuff is plesiosaurus. It's always a surprise that plesiosaurus is a little guy. So I'm happy it's in the game. It's just like I wish it didn't have the snake head. I wish it had much better patterns. It's just a little uninspiring to me. And because I put Ichthyosaurus as B because it's just kind of what the animal looks like, but it's uninspiring, and this one is uninspiring and kind of not what the animal looked like, I think I'll have to go with C.
Harsh.
Yeah, I don't want to be that harsh on this one, but
Is it my turn? Am I the person who
Yes.
does this now?
yes, it is.
Yes. Yes, it is. Thank you. Here's what I think, folks. I think that this is an acceptable first draft of a Jurassic. I almost said Jurassified. of a Jurassified plesiosaur. And if they showed this to me, I would say, I like a lot of what you're doing with the shape. Maybe we can work on the color a bit and have a conversation about the head. That being said, I got a lot out of the palette when I saw it. So B.
S tier for a good palette.
No, B. But you're making a new game. Maybe touch some of the old designs up a little bit for JW3. I'll give like not all of them, but like some of the ones where you're like, oh, this is dog shit, like Deinonychus. Maybe get rid of some of the scales on this little guy. Ideas.
Alice snoring so loud right now.
Yo, is he catching some big honk shoes right
He's
now?
catching
Bro?
some big Z's.
Nice.
This is also a B for me, for pretty much the same reasons everyone else has said. And Alex, I like what you said because it's how I felt. I mentioned the first draft thing for Acrocanthosaurus, and it's very similar to this. I don't hate this. In fact, even though I know that the snake's head is wrong, I do think it's cute. Like if it weren't cute, it might push it into C territory for me. But it's cute. It otherwise looks like Plesiosaurus, especially from the distance at which you look at it in the game. Mostly, like especially as one of the smaller marine animals. I'm not tending to spend much time in the lagoons, so what you see from the surface of the water is a Plesiosaurus, and it serves that purpose quite well. The colors could be better, but I'm not like horribly bothered by the snake head. I know it's wrong, but I'm just like, oh well, whatever. But it does. I think if the colors were the same and the head was not snaky, I think that would probably drag it into A tier. But we're not there, so we're in B tier.
Okay.
Fair enough.
And with that,
All right. With B's from everyone except for me, Plesiosaurus goes in B tier with its compatriot.
Nice.
It's
it goes
fitting.
where it belongs in the trash.
All right, let's find out who we're rolling next and who we would have had
Oh
to
my
record a
God.
second video about today. I know there's not a lot of
Alrighty.
people on that wheel.
Small.
It's time to
It's time to spin.
Spin.
That wheel.
Round and round and round it goes. Where will it end?
Oh no, we're gonna have fun.
Oh, Alex finally has something. Alex can finally make the point he's wanted to make since the lost version of this, where we did it all in one episode.
Oh my God! Right.
Oh, and I've been looking at so many basal saurosaurs, and I have such strong opinions about what megaraptorans are now.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm really looking
Well,
forward
everybody,
to this.
We'll talk to you next week about megaraptorans, which is totally a thing paleontologists can do based on a large amount of material that's easy to interpret.
And I was told by Australian friends that there is a correct way to pronounce the animal, the name of this animal, and it's not the way that we do.
Is it Australovenator?
No, it's the way every Australian pronounces it. So the way we pronounce it is Australovenator.
Mm-hmm.
The way every Australian pronounces it is Australovenator.
Oh, really?
Well, I won't be adopting that.
Scott, do you remember that Instagram reel I sent you of the clip from I think Maxine of Mia Goth yelling,
Bottle-o?
"No, I'm a star," but it sounds because of her accent like she's saying,
No.
"No, I'm a stone."
They're gonna go to the Bottle-o? A joke? Are you kidding me?
I don't know.
You're gonna tell me
Drongo is
that
a real
A
Drongo's a
Drongo?
great turn
No,
of phrase. Have you ever heard of Drongo before?
no.
Unchained.
There's a group of people in your country called bogans, and
A
it's
mild
yeah,
form of insult meaning idiot or stupid fellow. Drongo.
Wait, here before I do the reading of the patrons, Dalton, here's no Emma Stone, please.
Please, Emma Stone! I'm sorry, it's too late.
I saw this and it's one of those things where the word you read changes how you see it, because I just saw it as like, I don't know, something like, my reaction when Emma Stone doesn't do something or whatever. I don't know. But it said Emma Stone on the text. So anyway, we have patrons. They've got names. And a brief note about patrons. Being a patron will ensure that you enter the afterlife that is for good people and not for bad people.
in the one true religion, which we'll reveal at Gorgosaurus tier or higher.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. If you join us at Gorgosaurus tier or higher, we will inform you whether or not God is real, and if so, which one he is.
Welcome to the founding of the mega church that is the Skeleton Crew,
Hey, listen,
where you
if
get
we,
into
if
heaven
we wanted to
for
make
money.
real money, that's where we'd be going,
It's the Egyptian ones.
Is it? So, a note about our patrons. First of all, they do have names, and I'll tell you what they are shortly. But second, being a patron will make your life better. It will cure your health issues. If your joints hurt, they will stop hurting. You'll grow several inches in height. If you have any sort of allergies, you'll no longer be allergic to those things. Are you allergic to peanuts? Well, if you pay us $300 to $100 a month on Patreon, you won't be anymore. I'm a doctor.
Yeah, half of our
For legal
patron
purposes, not a medical
have a
doctor,
PhD.
despite teaching
Have
medical
large,
medicine.
flashing red letters.
You will remain allergic to peanuts. Unfortunately, we haven't worked that one out yet. You may not stay allergic to like cilantro or whatever. If cilantro tastes like soap to you, subscribe to our Patreon. You'll be able to eat Mexican
Give it a
food.
shot.
Yeah. So anyway, our patrons, the people who can now taste the wonderful glory of good cilantro, include Benjamin Seepser, nickname, Philip Fico, Christopher Bellis Jones, Aaron Anderson, Adamolos, Black Spectral Pig, Blacklight Virus, Camphibia, Chaotic Kaiju, Dino Dom, Kevin Preem, King Zashu, Life Finds a Way, Max Ironpaw, Ryan Wants to Die, The Wigster, Wanderer, and Wheat. I like The Wigster. That's a great one
That's
to
a cool
say.
name.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's fun.
And so those are our patrons at Gorgosaurus tier and higher. But of course, I want to take this moment to thank all of our patrons, because we really would not be able to keep doing this if it weren't for you guys. You are a huge part of the Skeleton Crew and its continued survival and existence in this increasingly threatening age of media and the dark the dark twilight that awaits all of our civilization. And we're just happy to we're happy that you've chosen to spend the end of days with us. Thank you. And next week we'll talk about, what are we talking about? Australopithecus. Yeah, it's a Megaraptor. And
Australopithecus.
yeah, maybe we should talk about Rapator.
Aussie.
Rah, rah, rah.
Bye.
Bye.